The evening sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, painting long golden lines across the wooden table where I sat, sipping the last of my coffee. I hadn't seen my son in months. Work had pulled him away to another state, and even our phone calls had become shorter, more polite. Still, today felt different. Today, he was coming home, and he wasn't coming alone. He'd told me weeks ago, "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet." His voice carried that nervous excitement I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. I smiled back then, thinking he'd finally found someone who made him happy. The knock on the door came soft, hesitant. When I opened it, there he was, my son, standing taller, older, but with that same familiar look in his eyes. And beside him, she stood quietly, holding her purse with both hands. She was beautiful, not in a glamorous way, but in a calm, steady one. There was something unreadable about her, something that made me curious. My son introduced her. "Mom, this is Emily." We sat together, sharing tea and small talk. She smiled when she spoke, polite but distant. My son looked happier than I'd seen him in years, yet a strange tension lingered in the room, a silence that felt heavier with every passing minute. After dinner, I finally asked, half teasing, "So, when's the wedding?" My son opened his mouth, but before he could say a word, Emily leaned forward and whispered, almost too softly, "We got married yesterday." The world stopped for a heartbeat. My cup froze halfway to my lips. My son's eyes widened, as if even he hadn't expected her to speak first. "You, what?" I asked, my voice trembling. She smiled, but her hands were shaking. "We got married yesterday. We didn't want to wait any longer." My son looked down, unable to meet my eyes. The warmth in the room vanished, replaced by the hollow sound of my own heartbeat. I searched their faces for an explanation, something that made sense, but all I found was silence. After a long pause, I said quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily looked at him. He didn't speak. She took a deep breath and said, "It wasn't planned. It just happened." That night, the laughter that once filled this home was gone. My son's room, once full of old trophies, scattered papers, and dreams, now felt foreign. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to make sense of what had just unfolded. Married. Yesterday. Without a word to me. When morning came, I woke to the sound of whispered voices in the living room. Emily's tone was low but firm. "You said you'd tell her before we left." "I tried," my son replied, "but you—" "I had to," she interrupted. She deserved to know. Their conversation faded as I stepped quietly toward the hall. Emily turned and froze when she saw me. My son spun around, guilt written all over his face. "I heard you," I said softly. "And I don't need explanations. But I do want honesty." He swallowed hard. "Mom, please." "No," I said. "I'm not angry. Just hurt." Emily looked down, her fingers fidgeting with her wedding ring. It was simple, silver, unadorned. But on her hand, it looked like a secret. "Who married you?" I asked finally. "Where was it?" Her eyes flickered up for a second before she answered. "It was in a courthouse. Just us. No guests." I nodded slowly, though something deep inside me whispered that wasn't the full truth. As the day went on, my neighbors stopped by, curious about the new face in my house. They smiled, asked questions, congratulated them, but every time someone mentioned the wedding, Emily's smile faltered.
That night, while everyone slept, I noticed light coming from under their door. Soft murmurs floated out, her voice tight, his defensive. "You can't keep this from her forever," she said. "I'm not keeping anything," he snapped. "You are. And when she finds out—" "Enough, Emily," he whispered harshly. A door creaked, and the house fell silent again. The next morning Emily was gone. The note she left behind was short, almost careless. "I'll be back soon. I need to clear my head." But she didn't come back that day. Or the next. My son sat on the porch staring at the empty street, his phone silent in his hands. For the first time he looked like the little boy I once held when he scraped his knee, lost, small, scared. "Mom," he said finally. "There's something you don't know." And just like that, the story I thought I understood, the story of a surprise wedding, began to unravel into something much darker. The house felt emptier than ever. Morning light touched the curtains, but the silence was heavy, the kind that made every small sound echo. My son sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at it like it might suddenly bring her back. "Any news?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "She's not answering texts. Not calls. Nothing." I made him coffee, though neither of us drank it. The smell filled the air, masking the quiet panic between us. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes when you've been holding something in too long. I sat across from him and waited. Finally he spoke. "Mom, there's something I didn't tell you," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Emily wasn't supposed to be here. Not yet." "What do you mean?" "She came earlier than planned. She said she had to get away, that her family wouldn't understand." "Wouldn't understand what?" I pressed. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the window. "That we got married." I frowned. "You mean they don't know?" He nodded slowly. "No one does." My chest tightened. "So you didn't just hide it from me. You hid it from everyone." He lowered his head, guilt spreading across his face. "She said we should keep it quiet. Just until things settle down." "But what things?" I asked, my voice rising. "What are you not telling me?" He didn't answer. Instead he stood and walked toward his room, pulling open a drawer. A few seconds later he came back holding a small brown envelope. "She left this," he said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photo. Emily standing in front of an old wooden house, smiling faintly. On the back a few words were written in blue ink. "If I disappear, check the attic." A chill ran through me. "Is this a joke?" He shook his head. "I don't think so." Without another word, we climbed the stairs to the attic, a place neither of us had been in years. Dust clung to the air. Boxes stacked high lined the walls, filled with old memories I'd long forgotten. But one box stood out. It wasn't mine. It was new, clean, and marked with a single word in red marker. "Emily." My son hesitated. "She must have brought this." He knelt down and lifted the lid. Inside were papers, hundreds of them. Letters, receipts, and photographs. All of them connected to one name, Eleanor Grace. "Who's that?" I asked. He stared at the photo of a woman who looked eerily like Emily, same eyes, same smile, but older. "She told me her mother passed away," he said softly. I flipped through the papers. Birth certificates, legal documents, a newspaper clipping, "Local woman missing, Eleanor Grace, 2016. My hands trembled. "Your wife's mother, she's missing?" He nodded slowly, still reading. "Emily said her mom disappeared when she was a kid. She never talked about it." The papers continued. A mix of grief and obsession. Notes written in a shaky hand. "He knows. They all know. Run before it's too late." And then tucked beneath everything a single photograph. Emily as a child holding her mother's hand. Behind them, standing in the shadows of that same wooden house, was a man. His face was blurred, as if scratched away intentionally. The air grew colder. "Mom," my son whispered. "Do you think she's in trouble?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because something in my gut told me this wasn't just about a missing woman. It was about a secret that had followed Emily her whole life. That night the house felt wrong, like someone else was there. The floor creaked. A shadow passed by the window. My son thought it was my imagination, but I'd lived long enough to trust my instincts. At midnight, a noise came from outside. The porch light flickered. I moved to the door quietly and looked out. There she was, Emily, standing at the end of the driveway, soaked in rain, eyes hollow. I ran to her. "Where were you?" She didn't answer. She just whispered, "We need to leave." My son appeared behind me, confused and terrified. "Emily, what are you talking about?" She grabbed his arm. "He knows where I am." "Who?" I asked. Her eyes darted toward the street, empty, but somehow alive with unseen danger. Then she looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "My father." The words hit like a cold wave. I thought he was dead, my son said. She shook her head. So did I. The evening after that tense conversation, silence filled the house like thick fog. I sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed into the horizon when my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my son. Mom, please don't be mad. We'll explain everything soon. Explain what? My mind raced. Was it guilt? Was he trapped? Or had he chosen a life that didn't need me anymore? A week later, the knock on my door came. When I opened it, there stood Jasmine, my daughter-in-law. Not with flowers. Not with apologies. But with a manila envelope. From Daniel, she said flatly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes, they trembled. I took the envelope, and before I could ask, she turned and left. I didn't stop her. Inside the envelope was a letter in my son's handwriting. Shaky, rushed, desperate. Mom, I didn't want things to happen this way. Jasmine is in trouble. We got married suddenly because she needed protection. Please trust me. You'll understand soon. My fingers froze. Protection? From what? Or from whom? That night I couldn't sleep. The city hummed outside, but my thoughts were louder. I replayed every word Jasmine had said. Every glance, every silence. Something wasn't right. The next morning I drove to their apartment. The door was half open. Inside, clothes were scattered, dishes left untouched, and a strange perfume lingered in the air. Daniel, I called. No response. But then I noticed something odd on the coffee table, a single Polaroid photo. My son and Jasmine smiling. Yet behind them, reflected in the mirror, was a man in a black suit watching. My stomach dropped. I took the photo to the police. They said it was probably nothing. Maybe a guest, one officer shrugged. But I saw the chill in his eyes when he looked closer. Later that day, Jasmine called me. Her voice was shaky this time. Mrs. Turner, please stop digging. You're putting everyone at risk. I asked her. Risk from what? She hung up. Days passed. Then one night, a car slowed in front of my house. Headlights stayed on. Engine running. I stepped to the window and saw a silhouette inside, watching. That's when I realized this wasn't about love anymore. It was about survival. And my son was hiding something darker than I could imagine. That night, the air outside felt heavier than usual. Every rustle of leaves, every passing car made me jolt. I hadn't been this paranoid in years, but something deep down told me this fear wasn't misplaced. I picked up the Polaroid again. The man in the background wasn't just some coincidence. There was a sharpness in his eyes, even through the blur. A kind of quiet authority. The kind you see in people who know too much and say too little. I turned the photo over. A small note was written in ink, almost faded. Trust no one. My heartbeat quickened. Who wrote that? Daniel or Jasmine? The next morning, I drove to the address my son used to send mail from. A small, nondescript apartment complex in downtown Atlanta. I asked the manager if Daniel Turner still lived there. The woman behind the desk hesitated before answering. Ma'am, he moved out a month ago. Didn't even leave a forwarding address. A month ago? But his wedding was only 2 weeks ago. I felt my throat tighten. Something was wrong with the timeline, terribly wrong. As I turned to leave, the manager added, "Oh, but his wife came by yesterday. She asked if anyone had dropped off a package for him." A package? Outside, rain started to fall, sharp and sudden. I got in my car, mind spinning. That's when I noticed it again. The same black sedan from the other night, parked across the street. Engine idling. Windows tinted. I took a deep breath, pretending not to notice. I pulled out and merged into traffic, keeping my eyes on the mirror. The car followed. For 10 straight minutes. Then at a red light, it suddenly turned left and vanished. When I finally reached home, I found a small envelope slipped under my door. No name. No return address. Inside, a single USB drive. I didn't plug it in right away. I stared at it, feeling the weight of whatever truth it might hold. After a long pause, I inserted it into my old laptop. They weren't arguing. They were planning. I turned the volume up. Man, once it's done you'll both be free. But she needs to keep quiet. Daniel. She's scared but she'll follow through. Just promise me my mom stays out of it. The video cut off abruptly. I sat frozen, tears welling. What had he gotten himself into? Who was this man? Before I could think, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Turner, a voice said, calm and deep. You shouldn't have watched that. My heart stopped. Who is this? I whispered. Someone who warned your son to keep you safe. But it's too late now. Jasmine talked. The line went dead. I rushed to my phone contacts, calling Daniel over and over. No answer. Then Jasmine. Straight to voicemail. That night I couldn't sleep. The world had turned into a maze of shadows and half-truths. But one thing became clear. This wasn't just a family misunderstanding. It was a conspiracy. The next morning I packed a small bag and headed straight to the police again. This time I demanded they trace the number that had called me. When the officer came back, he looked uneasy. Ma'am, that number's registered to a federal agency. A chill ran through my spine. What agency? I asked. I can't say. Before I could press further, another officer entered the room. Mrs. Turner? There's someone here to see you. I turned and there she was. Jasmine. Her face was pale, her hands trembling, but her eyes held something new. Fear mixed with defiance. We have to talk, she said. Now, the living room felt colder than before. The clock ticked louder, like it was counting down to something none of them wanted to hear. Ethan stood still, his hands trembling slightly as his mother, Margaret, stared at him in disbelief. Beside him, Layla, his wife, kept her chin high, but her eyes shimmered with fear. Margaret finally broke the silence. Yesterday, she said, her voice cracking. You got married yesterday? Layla nodded. Yes, ma'am. We did. Ethan looked down. Mom, I was going to tell you. You just what? Margaret's voice sharpened. You thought you'd sneak out, marry her behind my back, and pretend nothing happened? Mom, it wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She snapped. Layla took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm. Mrs. Turner, it wasn't meant to hurt anyone. Don't call me that, Margaret interrupted. You married my son without my blessing, without even meeting my family, and you want to call me Mrs. Turner? Ethan stepped forward. Mom, please. I love her. That's all that matters. Margaret turned away, pressing her hand against her forehead. You love her? Ethan, love doesn't erase betrayal. Love doesn't fix dishonor. Layla's lips trembled, but she stood her ground. I didn't take him away from you. He came to me. We fell in love. It just happened faster than we expected. Margaret's eyes narrowed. And I'm supposed to just accept that? Before Ethan could respond, his father, Robert, entered the room quietly. He had been listening from the hallway, his expression unreadable. Margaret, he said softly, let them speak. Margaret turned toward him, stunned. You knew. Robert shook his head. No, but I've seen the way Ethan looks at her. It's the same way I looked at you 40 years ago. Margaret's shoulders dropped, but she didn't soften. And look how that turned out, she whispered bitterly. The air grew heavier. Layla swallowed hard. Mr. Turner, she said timidly, I understand if you both hate me right now, but we didn't mean to hide forever. We were going to tell you after the ceremony. Ethan just wanted it simple. Robert nodded slowly. I don't hate you. I just wish you trusted us. Ethan's voice cracked. Dad, I didn't know how. You and Mom always had plans, expectations. You wanted a big wedding, a proper introduction. I just wanted peace. Margaret's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. Peace, she said. You call this peace? You've turned this home into a battlefield. Layla finally stepped closer to her. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I truly am. But I love him with everything I have. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that. For a long moment Margaret said nothing. Then she walked toward Layla slowly, her heels echoing across the hardwood floor. She stopped inches away and looked her dead in the eyes. You better mean that, she said coldly. Because if you hurt him, not even your vows will save you. Layla's breath hitched, but she nodded. I won't. Robert stepped between them. Enough, he said gently. It's done. They're married. We can't change it. We can only move forward. Margaret turned away, clutching the edge of the table to steady herself. Move forward, she whispered. You think it's that easy? Robert sighed. No. But holding on to anger won't make it easier. Ethan moved closer, his voice softer now. Mom, I need you to trust me. Please. Layla's my wife now. I need your blessing. Margaret looked at him, then at Layla again. The war in her eyes was clear. Love for her son fighting against the bitterness of being left out. Finally she exhaled. I can't bless something I wasn't part of, she said. But I won't stand in the way either. Ethan's eyes filled with relief, but Layla could still feel the tension. Margaret wasn't done, not really. Robert smiled faintly, trying to ease the tension. That's a start, he said quietly. Margaret turned toward the window. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the glass like silver tears. As the thunder rolled, Layla whispered under her breath, "It's going to be okay." But deep down, something told her it wasn't over. Something in Margaret's cold silence felt like a storm waiting to break again. And when the phone rang just seconds later, a shrill, piercing tone that made them all freeze, Layla knew the next chapter of their life had just begun. The ringing phone cut through the silence like a blade. Robert reached for it, but Margaret was faster. She snatched it from the table, her voice sharp. "Hello." Everyone watched her face shift. First confusion, then disbelief, then anger. "Yes, this is Mrs. Turner." A pause. "What?" She turned to the others, her eyes narrowing. "It's for her," she said, thrusting the phone toward Layla. Layla's heart skipped. She took the phone carefully. "Hello." A familiar voice answered. "Layla? It's Dr. Harris. We need to talk about your test results." Everyone froze. Even Ethan's breathing stopped. Layla stepped toward the hallway, whispering, "Now's not a good time, doctor." "I'm sorry," Dr. Harris said, "but this can't wait." Margaret's suspicion flared instantly. "Test results? What's going on?" Layla covered the phone, shaking her head. "It's nothing serious." But her trembling fingers betrayed her. Robert took a step closer. "Layla, if it's medical, you shouldn't hide it." She turned away, whispering, "Please, just give me a minute." Ethan followed her into the hallway, closing the door behind them. "What's wrong?" he asked. Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't want to ruin today. The doctor said they found something. They're not sure yet, but it could be serious." Ethan's throat tightened. "Serious how?" She shook her head. "A tumor. They don't know if it's benign." He grabbed her hands. "We'll get through this. Together." From behind the door, Margaret's muffled voice cut in. "Ethan, what's happening out there?" He opened the door. "Mom, please just give us space." But Margaret wouldn't back down. "Space? When you're hiding things again." Layla wiped her tears. "Mrs. Turner, please." "Not now." Margaret folded her arms. "You expect me to believe this isn't another lie?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Mom." Robert finally stepped in. "Margaret, enough. The girl's sick. You can argue later." The fire in Margaret's eyes dimmed for a moment. "Sick," she repeated. Her voice softened slightly. "What kind of sick?" Layla sat down, her face pale. "I don't know yet." Silence fell. The rain outside grew heavier, pattering against the windows like an unending drum. Robert put a hand on her shoulder. "We'll go to the hospital tomorrow. Whatever it is, we'll face it as a family." Margaret didn't speak. She turned and walked to the window, staring into the darkness. For the first time, her anger looked like fear. Later that night, the house was quiet again. Layla lay on the couch, exhausted. Ethan sat beside her, scrolling through his phone for hospitals, specialists, anything. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't," he said quickly. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I ruined everything. You married me and—" He cut her off, taking her hand. "I married you because I love you, not because everything was perfect." She smiled faintly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do," he said firmly. "And you're going to get better." Across the hall, Margaret watched from the doorway. The sight of her son holding that fragile girl stirred something in her, something she hadn't felt in years. Compassion. She turned to Robert. "Do you think she's telling the truth?" He looked at her with quiet disappointment. "You really think someone would fake this?" Margaret sighed. "I don't know anymore. But she's so young." Robert put an arm around her. "Maybe she needs a mother more than a critic right now." For once, Margaret didn't argue. The next morning, the family sat in the hospital waiting room. The walls were white, sterile, cold. Layla clutched Ethan's hand tightly. Margaret sat across from them, silent, her expression unreadable. A nurse appeared. "Layla Turner?" Layla stood, her legs trembling. Ethan started to rise, but she stopped him. "Stay. I'll be fine." He looked at her desperately. "Are you sure?" She nodded and followed the nurse. Minutes passed like hours. Margaret couldn't stop glancing at the door. Finally, Ethan spoke. "You don't have to stay if it's too much, Mom." She looked at him sharply. "You think I'd walk out on this?" He blinked, surprised. "No. I just didn't think you'd want to be here." Margaret folded her hands, staring at the floor. "I don't. But I have to be." Robert smiled faintly. "That's what love is." An hour later, Layla returned, pale but composed. Ethan jumped up. "What did they say?" Layla's voice shook. "They need to do more tests. But the doctor said it might not be cancer after all." Ethan hugged her tightly, relief washing over him. "That's good news." Layla smiled weakly. "It's not over yet. But it's something." Margaret stood, her lips parting slightly. "Layla." Everyone turned. Margaret took a step closer, hesitated, then reached out and held her hand. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for everything I said. You didn't deserve that." Layla's eyes widened. "Thank you." Margaret's voice softened. "I don't know if I can forget how you two did things, but I can start forgiving." Layla nodded, eyes wet. "That's all I could ever ask." Ethan watched, speechless, as his mother and wife shared the first fragile truce between them. Robert smiled. "See? Maybe this storm will pass after all." But as they walked out of the hospital together, none of them saw the man waiting across the street, watching them, eyes cold, hands in his coat pocket. He lifted his phone, took a picture, and whispered to himself, "So, she married into the Turners after all." Then he disappeared into the crowd. 2 days passed since the hospital visit, but the uneasy peace inside the Turner household was fragile. Margaret tried her best to act calm, cooking breakfast, asking soft questions, avoiding confrontation, but something about Layla's silence still felt off. She had seen those eyes before. Not in her daughter-in-law, but in herself, back when she was hiding something she could never say aloud. That morning, Margaret walked into the living room and saw Layla sitting by the window, staring out at the empty street. "You haven't touched your tea," she said gently. Layla didn't turn. "I'm not really thirsty." Margaret hesitated, then sat down across from her. "I know I've been difficult," she admitted. "But I meant what I said at the hospital. I want to start over." Layla gave a faint smile. "Thank you. That means more than you think." For a brief moment, peace returned. The sunlight through the curtains painted soft gold on the walls. But then, a knock on the door shattered it. Robert opened it. A man in a dark gray coat stood there, holding an envelope. His expression was unreadable. "Delivery for Mrs. Ethan Turner," he said. Layla froze. "That's me." The man handed her the envelope, nodded, and left without another word. Robert frowned. "No return address." Layla tore it open. Inside was a single photograph, an old one. It showed her, years younger, standing outside a courthouse, next to a man she hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Her hands began to shake. Margaret noticed. "Layla? What is that?" Layla quickly folded the photo. "Nothing. Just an old friend." Ethan walked in at that moment, catching the tension. "What's going on?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Ask your wife." Layla stood abruptly. "It's nothing." But her trembling voice gave her away. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Layla, tell me the truth." She looked at him for a long moment, tears gathering in her eyes. Then she whispered, "It's not just about the illness, Ethan. There's something I never told you." He went pale. "What do you mean?" Layla's voice broke. "Before I met you, I was married." The room fell silent. Even the ticking clock seemed to stop. Margaret's mouth opened in disbelief. "Married?" Layla nodded, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "It wasn't a real marriage. It was protection. I was 19, alone, scared. That man, he promised to help me escape someone dangerous." Ethan's voice trembled. "Who?" She swallowed hard. His name was Malcolm Crane. Robert's eyes widened slightly. The lawyer. Layla's gaze flickered up. You know him. Robert exchanged a glance with Margaret. He represented a few powerful people. Got caught in a corruption case, then vanished. No one's heard from him since. Layla's lip quivered. He's the one in that photo. Ethan stared at her, the betrayal and fear mixing in his expression. Layla, why didn't you tell me? Because I thought he was gone, she whispered. Until last week, when I saw him outside the hospital. Margaret stepped back, her breath catching. You mean he's here? In this city? Layla nodded. And he knows where I live. That night, Ethan barely slept. Every sound outside made him jump. At 2 a.m. he got up and looked out the window. A black sedan was parked across the street. Its headlights were off, but the faint glow of a cigarette ember flickered inside. Someone was watching. He rushed downstairs. Mom, Dad, wake up. Within minutes, the lights were on. Robert peeked through the curtain. Whoever it is, he's not just passing by. Margaret grabbed her phone. I'm calling the police. Layla, standing behind Ethan, shook her head quickly. No. Please don't. Ethan turned to her, furious. Why not? Because he'll know, she said, voice trembling. Malcolm always knows. If the police come, he'll disappear again. And next time he won't just follow me. He'll hurt someone. Robert's jaw tightened. What does he want? Layla's eyes filled with tears. He wants what I took from him. Margaret frowned. What did you take? Layla hesitated, then whispered. A file. One that could destroy him. At sunrise, the car was gone. But the fear remained. Layla finally told them everything. How she had discovered Malcolm's criminal dealings, how she'd run away after he staged his own death, and how she'd been living under a new identity ever since. Margaret couldn't believe it. You mean to tell me you've been living in our house while a criminal is after you? Ethan stepped forward. Mom, enough. She didn't choose this. But Robert wasn't calm anymore either. Ethan, this man is dangerous. If he's found her, none of you are safe. Layla's voice cracked. I can fix it. I still have the file. If I hand it over, maybe he'll leave us alone. Ethan shook his head. You think a man like that just forgives and walks away? No, Layla. This ends tonight. He picked up his phone. Layla grabbed his hand. What are you doing? Calling an old friend, he said. A private investigator. Margaret looked up sharply. You mean Jake? The one from your college days? Ethan nodded. If anyone can find Malcolm before he finds us, it's him. Layla's heart pounded. Ethan, please. Don't drag more people into this. But it was too late. The call had already gone through. An hour later, a black SUV pulled up outside the Turner house. A tall man stepped out, calm, confident, eyes scanning the neighborhood like a hunter. Ethan opened the door before he could knock. Jake, thank you for coming. Jake nodded once, his tone clipped. You said you've got someone following you. Tell me everything. Ethan led him inside. Layla hesitated, then spoke, her voice trembling but steady. His name's Malcolm Crane. I used to be married to him. Jake didn't flinch. Crane. Yeah, heard that name before. You should have told me sooner, Ethan. Ethan frowned. You know him. Jake smirked slightly. Let's just say I've been trying to find him for years. Layla's heart skipped. Why? Jake's eyes darkened. Because he's the reason my brother disappeared. The room felt colder than it had any right to be. Jake stood at the edge of the living room, staring at Malcolm's reflection in the tall mirror across the hall. Layla sat silent on the sofa, her hands trembling against her lap, the ring on her finger catching the dim light like a lie too bright to ignore. Malcolm's voice cut through the stillness. So you finally know, he said, calm but with that edge, the kind that makes even truth sound like a threat. Jake's chest rose and fell. You planned this, didn't you? His tone was low, dangerous. All of it. The charity, the company, Layla. Layla flinched at her name. Her eyes flicked to Malcolm, then back to Jake. Jake, please. He cut her off. No. Not this time. You had your chance to tell me the truth. Malcolm stepped closer, his shoes clicking against the marble floor. You think this is about you? He scoffed. You were just the final piece, son. Jake's fist clenched. Don't call me that. Oh, but you are, Malcolm replied, smirking faintly. Not by blood, perhaps, but by choice. You walked into my world, my family, my legacy. You wanted power and I gave you access to it. Layla. She was just the invitation. Layla rose suddenly, her voice shaking. Enough, Malcolm, she cried. You used me. You used all of us. Malcolm turned his cold gaze toward her. You think you were innocent in all this, Layla? You think Jake wouldn't have fallen for your story if you hadn't played your part perfectly? Jake stepped between them. What part? He demanded. Layla looked like she might collapse. Tears blurred her eyes as she whispered. He made me marry you, Jake. The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Jake blinked, unable to process it. What did you just say? Layla sobbed, shaking her head. He said it was the only way to save my mother's company. He said if I didn't go through with it, she'd lose everything. I didn't know he was going to. Malcolm's laugh broke her sentence. It was sharp, mocking, poisonous. Oh, come now. Don't act like you didn't enjoy playing the victim. You wanted out of your old life. I gave you one. And you gave me what I wanted, access. Jake's mind spun. Access to what? Malcolm's smirk widened. To your mother's estate. Jake froze. My mother's what? Layla covered her mouth in horror. You didn't tell him? She whispered to Malcolm. Malcolm's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. Of course not. Why spoil the surprise? He walked to the cabinet, opening a drawer. From it, he pulled a folder thick, sealed, stamped with an old crest Jake hadn't seen in years. Jake's voice broke. That's my family's trust. Exactly, Malcolm said. You see, your mother wasn't just some small-town widow. She was part of a legacy older than either of us could imagine. And when she passed, the estate's inheritance clause became complicated. Only through marriage, Jake. A marriage approved by the board. Jake staggered back. You used me to get to her trust? Not just used, Malcolm said. I guided you. Layla's scream tore through the room. You ruined everything. Malcolm's hand slammed down on the folder. No, Layla. I built everything. From the ashes of your lies, from the wreckage of your poor choices. You think love saves people? Love destroys them. Jake's eyes darkened. He stepped forward slowly. Then you should know what destruction feels like. Malcolm chuckled. What are you going to do, Jake? Hit me? Run to the press? You're standing in a house built on my name. My influence. My money. Jake's voice turned cold. Not for long. He grabbed the folder from Malcolm's hand and tore it open. Documents spilled across the floor. Signatures, contracts, and a series of hidden transfers linking Malcolm to shell companies overseas. Layla gasped. You were moving the inheritance funds. Jake finished her sentence. Into offshore accounts. Under aliases. Malcolm's smirk faltered for the first time. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, Jake said. Because I've been digging too. I found the same trail you buried years ago. The one that led straight to Layla's family bankruptcy. You didn't save her mother's company, Malcolm. You stole it. Layla's breath caught. That's why my mother lost everything? Jake nodded grimly. He orchestrated it. He trapped you. Just like he tried to trap me. Malcolm's voice broke its calm for the first time, rising into anger. You think you can take me down with a few pieces of paper? You're a boy playing in a world of men. Jake stared him dead in the eyes. No, Malcolm. I'm the son you tried to build in your image, and now I know exactly how to destroy that image. There was a sound at the door, faint, deliberate. Two suited men stepped in, badges glinting. Malcolm Graves, one of them said. You're under arrest for financial fraud and corporate coercion. Malcolm's face went pale. You called them? Jake stepped back, voice steady. No. She did. Layla's phone was still in her hand. The call had been running the whole time. Malcolm's fury turned to disbelief. You betrayed me. Layla met his eyes, trembling. You betrayed everyone. As they handcuffed him, Malcolm's last words echoed through the room. You think this ends with me, Jake? You think you've won? You don't even know who signed that marriage certificate. Jake froze, his stomach twisting. What are you talking about? Silence. Jake turned to Layla, her eyes red. her voice barely a whisper. What if he's telling the truth, Jake? What if it wasn't just him? Jake stared at the scattered papers, the broken lies, the fading echo of a man who thought he owned everyone around him. He exhaled slowly. Then we find out who did. Outside, police lights flickered against the night. Inside, a new storm was just beginning. The night after Malcolm's arrest felt endless. Rain tapped against the wide glass windows. The city beyond blurred into silver streaks of light and shadow. Jake sat alone at the dining table, the folder still open. Documents spread like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that refused to make sense. Layla entered quietly, wrapped in one of his old sweaters, eyes hollow from hours of crying. They said he's refusing to talk, she murmured. He wants his lawyer. Jake didn't look up. He always wants control. Even now. Layla sat down across from him, voice breaking. I thought once he was gone, everything would feel lighter. But it doesn't. It feels heavier. Jake rubbed his temples, staring at a signature at the bottom of a marriage authorization form. The signature looked familiar. Too familiar. Layla, he said softly, do you recognize this name? She leaned closer, eyes narrowing at the paper. Catherine Monroe? She whispered. Jake's stomach sank. That's my mother's maiden name. Layla frowned. But how? Why would your mother's name be on our marriage paperwork? Jake didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he grabbed his phone and made a call he never thought he'd have to make again. Mr. Bennett, he said when the old lawyer answered. We need to talk. It's about my mother's estate and my marriage. There was a long pause. Come to my office, the old man said at last. Now. The office smelled like old leather and burnt coffee. Files lined the walls and tall metal cabinets, each labeled with years and names Jake barely remembered. Mr. Bennett was older now, thinner, his hands shaking slightly as he adjusted his glasses. I was wondering when you'd come, he said. Your mother always said you'd find out eventually. Jake's pulse quickened. Find out what? The old lawyer sighed, motioning for them to sit. That your marriage wasn't an accident. Layla's eyes widened. What do you mean? Bennett leaned forward. Before your mother passed, she established a conditional trust, one that could only be unlocked through union with a family connected to the Graves Corporation. Jake froze. You mean Malcolm's family? The lawyer nodded slowly. Your mother and Malcolm's father decades ago had an arrangement. Business and legacy intertwined. When you came of age, the deal would activate. But your mother died before she could explain it to you. The executor was Malcolm himself. Layla's voice cracked. So he. Yes, Bennett said quietly. He used that clause. He found Layla, who had the right background, the right public image. He orchestrated the introduction. And once the marriage was legal, he gained partial access to your family trust. Jake felt the floor drop out beneath him. His hands gripped the armrest. So my mother planned this? Bennett hesitated. She planned a merger, not a manipulation. She trusted Malcolm's father, not Malcolm. But when his father passed, Malcolm took over. Twisted it. Jake stood abruptly, pacing. And you just let this happen? The lawyer's voice trembled. You think I had a choice? The will was airtight. Your mother signed it. The only way to break it was proof of coercion, which you now have. Layla whispered. The recordings. Jake turned to her sharply. The call with Malcolm. She nodded. It's all there. Him admitting he forced me. Jake exhaled slowly, a plan forming in his mind. Then we use it. But Bennett's expression grew darker. There's more, he said. Something you haven't seen yet. He pulled another envelope from his drawer. It was old, sealed with the same wax crest Jake remembered from childhood. His mother's handwriting sprawled across the front. For Jake, when you are ready. Jake's throat tightened. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was a letter. My dearest Jake, if you are reading this, then the path I feared most has already begun. I wanted to protect you from the Graves legacy, but I couldn't stop what I signed. Your father's debts tied our family to theirs long before you were born. I did what I thought was best. I ensured you would never face ruin even if it meant binding you to them. But love, Jake, love can undo contracts. Remember that. The only way to free yourself is not through law but through truth. Find the truth about the Graves family, and you'll find who you truly are. Tears blurred Jake's vision. The letter shook in his hand. Layla reached across the desk, touching his fingers gently. Jake. He closed his eyes. She knew. She knew this would happen. Bennett's voice was quiet. There's one more thing. A file your mother asked me to keep sealed until the marriage became public. He slid a brown folder across the table. Inside were photographs, black and white aged, of two families standing together at a courthouse. In one of them, young Catherine Monroe, Jake's mother, stood beside a man Jake didn't recognize. And beside them, a little boy with piercing eyes. Jake's heart stopped. That's Malcolm, he whispered. As a child. Layla frowned. So they knew each other since then? Bennett shook his head. They were family, Jake. Distant cousins through inheritance ties. Which means... Jake finished the thought, horror creeping in. Which means this marriage wasn't just a business arrangement. It was a blood contract. Layla stepped back, whispering, "Oh my God." Jake turned toward the window, rain streaking down the glass like tears. He wasn't trying to ruin us, Layla. He was trying to complete what their family started. Bennett looked away. And now that you've broken it, others will come. The Graves name doesn't die quietly. Jake's voice hardened. Then neither will the truth. He folded his mother's letter and tucked it into his coat. We end this. No more secrets. Layla took his hand, her fear replaced by something colder, resolve. Together. Jake met her eyes. Together. Outside, the storm deepened. Thunder rolling through the city like an omen. The Graves' legacy wasn't over. It had just begun to fight back. The night was darker than usual. No stars, no moonlight, just a restless wind sweeping through the city. Jake and Layla stood outside the Graves family estate, the mansion looming like a relic of old sins. They had returned for one reason, to uncover what Malcolm left behind. Inside, the air smelled of dust and history. Papers were scattered, books pulled from shelves, drawers left open as if someone had already been searching. Layla whispered, "Are you sure we should be here?" Jake's eyes scanned the room. "If we don't end it now, it'll never stop haunting us." They reached Malcolm's study, the heart of his empire. Behind his desk hung a massive portrait of the Graves patriarch. Jake stared at it, then pressed his hand against the frame. It clicked. A hidden latch released. The portrait swung open. Behind it, a steel safe. Layla blinked. "You've got to be kidding me." Jake knelt, pulling a small metal case from his pocket. He always used his ego as the key. He turned the dial, entering a sequence of numbers. Malcolm's birth date, his company founding date, and the day he met Layla. The lock clicked. Inside the safe, a single envelope sealed in red wax. Jake opened it carefully. A letter typed and signed in Malcolm's name. "If you're reading this, then the end has already begun. Everything you thought you knew about our families was a lie, including the trust, the company, and the name Graves itself. You were never my enemy, Jake. You were my replacement." Jake's eyes widened. Replacement. Layla stepped closer. "What does that mean?" He flipped the page. "Your mother and my father didn't just build a business. They built an heir. The Monroe bloodline was meant to continue through one child, mine. But after my father's death, your mother took what was hers and disappeared. You were the one meant to inherit the Graves legacy. Not me." Jake froze. His mind reeled. "No, that's impossible," Layla whispered. "He's saying you were supposed to be the real heir?" Jake's voice broke. "He hated me because I was never supposed to exist in his world." He turned the letter over. Another note taped behind it. A birth certificate. His own. But the name was wrong. Jacob Malcolm Graves. Layla gasped. "Jake, your real last name." He stumbled back. "He wasn't my enemy. He was my brother." Silence filled the room. Only the faint ticking of a clock could be heard. Layla's voice trembled. So everything, the manipulation, the marriage, the trust, it was all family. Jake stared at the paper, anger and grief mixing in his chest. He didn't want money. He wanted revenge. For being replaced. Then Layla noticed something else. A flash drive taped inside the safe. She pulled it out. "There's more." Jake slid it into the laptop on the desk. The screen flickered to life. Dozens of video files appeared. each labeled with dates and locations. Surveillance footage. Every move Jake had made in the last 2 years. Layla whispered. He was watching us. They opened the last video. It showed Malcolm sitting at this very desk speaking directly to the camera. If you're watching this, Jake, then you've finally found what I left you. You think you've won, but you haven't. The Graves bloodline doesn't die with me. It changes hands. And now it's yours to carry. Protect it or it will destroy you. The screen went black. Layla turned to Jake, shaken. He wanted you to become him. Jake closed the laptop slowly. No. I'll end what he started. He picked up a lighter from the desk, flicked it on and held it beneath the envelope. The flame caught, curling the edges of Malcolm's letter until it turned to ash. Layla stared, whispering, Jake. He turned to her, calm now. It ends tonight. No more lies. No more legacies. They walked outside together, hand in hand. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the mansion in pale gold. The storm was gone. Jake looked back one last time, at the house, at the smoke rising through the morning air, and exhaled deeply. Let it burn, he said. As they drove away, Layla rested her head on his shoulder. So what now? Jake smiled faintly. Now we live. Without the Graves. Without ghosts. But as their car disappeared down the long, winding road, the camera in the mansion's corner light blinked once, still recording. And somewhere in the archives, another video file autosaved with a new name. Jacob Graves' successor. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun.